Can I just ask you about Max? I mean, you think we've seen something fairly extraordinary today? He was on fresh tyres. Let's bear that in mind.
But nevertheless, he did a job, unbelievable. The way he passed, impressive. But I mean, I knew the guy's good, but he proved it again to everybody what he can do.
Ammar, this might be one of our most contentious videos, but we may actually not even come up with a conclusion. So we put up a question both on Twitter and in our community space to ask you guys who you think had the better drive in Brazil 2016. And the results of that were massively inconclusive. Of 87 votes, Max got 55%, Lewis got 45%. On our Twitter feed, it was the other way around. And actually, even going back, Autosport put down as driver ratings after the race. Unsurprisingly, both Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen got perfect tens for the Brazilian Grand Prix 2016. But we are not fence sitters here at Tyre GP, and we are going to come to some kind of conclusion, brackets probably. But if you want to hear more idiot conversations and debates from Ammar and me, please subscribe, and you won't miss a single one. We're going to get into it now. Brazil 2016 was a fairly seminal race in the history of one Maximilian Verstappen. But was it also a seminal race for young Lewis Hamilton, who for the first time ever won the Brazilian Grand Prix that year? We are going to do a cheeky rewind and head back to the heady days of 2016. Ammar, can you remember that race? What were your thoughts about it when you watched it?
Well, I can remember it like it was yesterday, only because we just got done with a very wet Brazilian Grand Prix in Sao Paulo. The race, I think, looking at the recording time frame, was about 3 hours and 35 minutes, and the 2016 race wasn't that far off. It was like 3 hours and 18 minutes or something. Something like 18 and 24. It's all within a few minutes of each other, right? I think once your race has gone beyond 2 hours, then you're like, I'm in zombie mode. Then it's like the witching hour back then, right? So then there's what we are, right? But yeah, I don't. So I feel like, and we're going to get into this, right? I feel like the races were similar and dissimilar in many different ways, right? But I think that they sort of are. I think my biggest takeaway is they're a reminder of the greatness of Max, and one was at the front end of his career, and one is sort of present day, if you will. That's my sort of biggest takeaway looking back at 2016.
Yeah, I agree with that. It was a pretty incredible race, and I guess the only difference being that in 2024, Max went pretty much unchallenged. He made everybody on the grid, and this is a really high quality grid. He made everybody look like they were at school. It was nuts. But in 2016, he had at least one peer who was roughly on his level, and that's why we're having a little debate about it right now. Just a quick recap. I'm sure everybody in the comments, everybody who's watching this video knows this race inside out anyway, but just for the avoidance of doubt, it was a wet race. Started off under the safety car. As soon as we went green flag racing, off went Lewis Hamilton into the distance. And from fourth, Max Verstappen immediately overtakes Kimi Räikkönen. Fast forward two safety car periods and two red flag periods, we find Max Verstappen initially on intermediates, realizing that is a completely idiotic decision. Red Bull bring him back in again, dropping him from 5th to 16th with a brand spanking new set of wets. He then goes on a charge from P16 to 3rd in 13 laps, setting off what I can only describe as one of the greatest wet weather drives of all time, surpassed only really by him doing a repeat and much better, which is hard to believe actually, much better in 2024. So surely Ammar, it has to be Max Verstappen, doesn't it? Surely it's him.
It is Max Verstappen in 2016 for sure. You can say that, right? Because I mean, on that day, the elements did not favor him. I'm thinking back. I mean, this was such a long race, right? And you just described it. 3 safety cars, 2 red flags, 15,000 yellow flags. That's what it felt like. So So
Everybody falling off the road. Yeah.
everyone falling off the road. Sebastian Vettel spinning off a couple times, Raikkonen putting it in there. I mean, look, and even Red Bull made a mistake, which, good God, you wouldn't have expected that. Like if you're recent to the F1 viewing party, like go back and watch that race. Even Red Bull make mistakes back in the day. They don't make them anymore.
Which is painful to me, because that was the one time, if they hadn't made a mistake, Max probably would have finished ahead of Nico, and Lewis probably would have won the title.
Oh my God, look at you. Now you're rooting for Max. That's quite the thing. Anyway,
I'm always rooting for Max. I think he's great.
Yeah, I think, look, that was all Max back then. I think the recent race 2014, you could say it was all Max, and you know, slightly aided by what happened in the race. And again, there's nothing to take away from it, because fortune favors the brave. You got to be there to win it, right? And he was completely there. And let's just say one thing, like in both
Wait,
races,
what are we talking about? 2024 or 2016?
24. I'm comparing 24 and 2016, right? And I'm saying that you asked me if it was just Max, right? And I said, yes, it is just Max. It really was back then too, because to make up as many places as he did in 13 laps, I mean, that you couldn't script it. Like this would be the script of the new Formula One movie that's coming out with Apex F1 and Brad Pitt doing that. I don't know, maybe they have it in there, right? But it was just crazy,
be a
right?
wet race for sure.
And I think, those of you that want to argue will argue that yes, he was on new tires, and I 100% agree with you. The fact that he had brand new tires over the field really helped, but man, that's a lot of places to be making up. In the track in Sao Paulo isn't very big. I mean, it isn't very long. It's not a long track. And there's only a couple of areas where you can make up places. So to pick off people that way was just crazy.
But he was, really. Okay. So look, I'm obviously going to make the other argument here, because someone has to. That sure, Max drove an absolutely unbelievable race, but he didn't win it, and he wasn't even catching the guy up at the front, because Lewis didn't make any mistakes that race, not one, and he was on super old tires at the end. Mercedes made one tire change under a red flag, so they never actually made a tire change in anger during a green flag period. So Lewis essentially was on like gumballs by the time he hit the checkered flag. But despite that, and despite Max making a fairly massive error, saving it but keeping it out of the wall, Nico doing the same thing, needing to win that race. There was no margin for error there. He had to win that race. He did it. He did it every time he was being attacked by Max. He was able to up his pace a little bit. Even at the beginning of the race, as soon as Max started to put in a fastest lap, Lewis started to up his pace again. He had to do it because he could not win that race. But that's what he did. The other thing that everyone sort of makes a big comment about is the homework that Max was doing. The prep was brilliant, right? Under every single safety car, you could see Max was like shooting up right next to Kimi Räikkönen, taking a different line out of Junção. And he was then taking another different line to everybody else through the first corner, that really tight line to take the inside of turn 1. And then taking that wide line out of turn 3. And it paid dividends, didn't it? Because he used that line to take Nico Rosberg off the safety car restart. And in fact, as you watched the race, the longer you watched it, everybody else started doing the same thing as well, because they were being told, look, this little 17-year-old is sitting there putting it around the outside of turn 3. That's where the grip is. You guys should all be doing the same thing. But what gets missed is that Lewis was actually doing the same thing as well under the safety car. He was also trying to find where the grip was, where the rubber hadn't been laid down in dry practice and qualifying over the preceding days of the weekend. But he was having to do it without telegraphing to the guy behind him that that's what he was doing. Subtle, effective, enough to win the race. And for me, that whole package together, the forethought that he needed to do the practice, the forethought that he needed to hide it from the guy behind, and then to bring it home on really old used tires to win it, I think for me just edges it.
I see that. I see everything you're saying. It's hard to disagree with your logic, but I don't agree with sort of the overarching theme of it, right? Which is to say that somehow Lewis had greater stakes attached. Yes, he had to win, but in a way, um, that was the only thing he could do. Like you got to the point in the championship, but this is all he had. He was either going to win it or lose it, so he had to kind of go all out. And on the other hand, a 17-year-old Max Verstappen did not have any stakes other than the fact that he has telegraphed to us throughout his career that he only cares about winning. Otherwise, he would, and I quote him, stay at home, right? So there's that. So I don't think that there's much to it. And look, I'm not going to take anything away from Lewis's drive, but there's something to be said about being in the lead, not having spray from other cars come through, not having to drive as aggressively because it's a different race when you're up front. And one thing we know in wet races, I mean, this is sort of ironic because we're coming off of the 2014 Brazilian Grand Prix where Mercedes again had the chance to win, is not giving up track position. So maybe Lewis could have pitted, but he was going to lose track position to Nico conceivably, and maybe even Max at that point. So, I mean, there were many things under consideration there. He had no choice. So I would argue that in a way, the race was pretty simple for him. Keep the car on the track, try to find the grip, and just bring it home. That's all he had to do. Nico wasn't really challenging Lewis on this day, right? Having seen the whole race, there was not one point where I thought, oh wow, Nico's actually going to catch him. Like it didn't look like it at all. I just didn't. So his race was completely different. Whereas I think what I saw from Max was also like, as you said earlier at the start, like this was a sign of, hey, I've arrived, I'm here. And him making a pass on the Iceman, I mean, that is a very underrated move because Kimi Raikkonen was no, what, why are you making that face? Like, come on. I mean, I know I'm biased here, but look, the idea of being able to take lines that no one else has been able to take, he showed us this in 2014 as well, 2024 as well. It's just who Max is. And I think that in a way, I kind of enjoy looking back at that race because he hasn't changed a bit. He really hasn't, and he was awesome to begin with, and he's still just awesome. Maybe awesomer if that's a way to describe it. So, in my opinion, I think that's the greater drive because you just had somebody that had look. To say that Max had no pressure on him would also be slightly misleading or disingenuous.
How much pressure did he have on
Sure.
him?
I mean, you're still a rookie. You're still trying to prove yourself. You want to make things happen,
He'd
and
already won a race
we
at that
know.
point.
I know, but I mean, look, it's still a performance business, right? He's still there to make a mark. He's trying to make his dad happy too, right? I mean, those kind of things, they're all there. So for me to sit up here and say, wow, Lewis's stakes were higher than Max's, or maybe he had less stress or more stress, I don't know. I can't do that stuff, especially when, like I said, Max has said all along that he's there to win, and he was trying to win. And good God, he also overcame the team's mistake. That was crazy. That's another pit stop there to sort of make it all the way back there too. So, it wasn't his fault that he kind of went backwards, right? But he did make up ground. I think your stat is perfect. In 13 laps to go from P16 to P3, right? Or P17, was it P16, 17? I can't remember, whatever it is. But that's pretty crazy. That really is.
Yeah, I don't agree with your stakes thing. I think you've performed some mental gymnastics to get us to there. But I do agree with the spray. That is true. Lewis pretty much the only spray he got was from Bernd Mailander when he was telling him to speed up because mate, you're getting you're fogging up my visor. Which actually he did. He did have a fogged up visor for quite a bit of the race. So I guess we can say that, but it's not the same thing. Max did have to come through the field. He did have a tire advantage. I do feel though that like the tire advantage only really helped him when he wasn't trying to overtake someone. It was actually just in clear air between cars. It gave him extra pace, and you knew that was the case because Daniel Ricciardo on his new wet tires was also pretty quick when he wasn't when he was chasing other cars. It's just that when he actually had to go past someone, Max was just miles more incisive. Some of the positions that some of the overtaking spots that he used were fairly incredible. Like he was using Pico de Pato quite a lot. In fact, his move for P3 round the outside of Sergio Perez was yeah. I mean, I was edge of my seat. I knew what was going to happen. I still felt
every single move, I think I can't remember a move in there where you're like, oh my God, that shouldn't be happening, right? And he kind of had his own racing line.
Yeah.
Like we should, I mean, they should change the racing line at Brazil to just say the Max Verstappen racing line. Like that should be something. I don't know. We name racing lines or not? We name stands and all these other turns and all. We should just do that. And it was just incredible, Shez. Like I mean, and look, the reality is Max Verstappen in that Red Bull looked like a different car, man. No one else did, including the race leaders. Now, I think you'd come back and argue that again.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know
All
about
right.
that.
You're going to do that. But again,
Race
he
leaders,
was.
yeah, I don't think Nico Rosberg was. I think Nico was playing it
I
so
don't think Nico
conservative.
was there. I mean, that
He was
P2
just
was
trying
there
to
for the
not.
taking.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
it
Nico
was
was
there.
just trying
It
to
really was.
not put it in the
Well,
wall.
it would have also been interesting to see if Max was trying to overtake Lewis then. I mean, and if he were put in a position where he could do that. Like we just won't know.
Yeah,
Had
yeah,
Red Bull
but
been a
he
little bit
did.
better, so
Yeah, that's true. But we had a couple of laps where he was sitting in Lewis's wheel tracks, and that's the point I'm trying to make. That actually, when he did have that opportunity, Lewis had the pace to overcome that because he'd been doing the
yeah, but
same work
it
under the
was only
safety
like,
car. That
what was it, like 4 laps or 5 laps that pretty much.
yeah.
So I
I
think
agree. It's
that would
not a
have played out a little
massive
bit
sample
differently,
set.
a little bit longer,
Maybe.
right? Had it happened. So yeah, again, I mean that's to say that look, we were just robbed of the opportunity to see that happen, and that would have been fantastic. Look, I can level with you that Lewis had an excellent drive in the context of the championship because he needed to really win that race, and that's the best he could do. He would have hoped for his nearest rival to finish a little bit lower. I think he was rooting for Max. So one of those few times, like just rooting for one or the others, like he was rooting for anything like that to happen. Much like, ironically, this season, Lando would have been hoping for Max to finish anything but second, and so he finished first. But there's that, right? So it was amazing. So in that regard, I cannot knock Lewis Hamilton's drive because to keep it in P1 after starting on pole, given all the safety cars, 3 safety cars, 2 red flags, 15 million yellow flags. The next time we talk about it, I'll bump it up to trillion. But it's amazing in and of itself. And we have seen time and time again that positions are given up very easily from race leads, and they can go just like that, right? And so what Lewis did there is pretty remarkable in and of itself. But I cannot overlook the fact that you had a 17-year-old drive a Formula One car. Like, I mean, we're talking about Kimi Antonelli and the prodigal set of F2 drivers that are coming through now. I mean, Max Verstappen was doing it 10 years ago. Is it 10 years? Yeah, it's almost 10 years, 8 years ago to be precise. But like, 8 years ago, like that's crazy that he was driving, and the way he was driving and finding grip against seasoned drivers. Like, no matter what you think of the Sebastian Vettels and the Kimi Raikkonens of the world, like these are accomplished drivers. They're world champions. Like they're not. It's not a joke. Fernando Alonso was in there too. Like although
Jensen
McLaren
Button
was
was
just
in there
trash.
too, just
Jensen
FYI.
Button was in there. That's right. That's right. The double DRS champ. Yeah, he was there. Yeah, so
That's true. I don't think he was ever actually overtaken by Max. He was so far
I
behind.
mean, my point is he looked so great with the car that none of these guys that had driven for, I don't know what was the combined experience between them, had to be like a century, if not more. It was just crazy. It was just
Yeah.
crazy. So that's pretty remarkable in my opinion.
Yeah, this for me is a tricky one, and I'm going to find it difficult to say this. But look, if Lewis's drive in that race was probably one of the greatest wet weather drives ever, but the problem is you can never see it in isolation because on that day he did have a peer, and that guy was Max Verstappen, who drove an arguably an even better race. And perhaps that's what this comes down to, that they were both unbelievably brilliant drives in adverse conditions, both with their own stakes.
I had to give rankings to both of them. I'd have given them both a 10, actually, to your
They
earlier
did, yeah,
point.
yeah, yeah. They
Yeah,
they
no,
did.
so I mean,
Well, Autosport did as well. They
yeah,
gave them both perfect tens. That was
they would
Ed
both get
Straw back then,
11s in my
actually.
opinion. I mean, for the
Yeah,
way
yeah,
they
yeah.
drove. I mean,
But
I
if
mean, you got to give
but
points to him saving his car from crashing too. Like that was amazing.
yeah, but then you
I
have
mean,
to
just
take points away for him getting in that situation in the first place.
oh come on. He didn't
Lewis
crash.
didn't do that. Lewis
No,
didn't
but
do that. He
Lewis
never
didn't
got
need to
himself in
do
a
that. He
position.
didn't need to push that
Well, Max
the way
Max
that Max
needed
did.
to Max needed to have a massively
You
wild
can't
moment, did he?
you can't do that. That's like saying somebody's breathing too heavy, then we're gonna take
But
points
but
from them.
you
Like,
but
no,
you
okay, buddy,
can
you can't do.
but you can say that Max
Yes,
making a
because
mistake is a positive, is it?
no, Max not making a mistake is a
But
positive.
he did
I
make
don't
a
look at that
mistake.
as
But it
it
was a
did. And
mistake.
like I said, if I'm breathing heavy and I'm still able to run the marathon without collapsing, that's a good thing. I
Okay, well
shouldn't be breathing
if
heavy.
we're gonna say that, then Nico Rosberg did the same thing.
We're not talking about Nico. I'm not
No,
arguing with you
but
about
I
Nico, but
am. I think Nico Rosberg had a much worse race, but
so your point is what?
he still had a massive save. Are we
What
saying
does
that
he
that's
do?
a good thing?
Yeah, I mean, look, as long as you didn't put it in the wall and lose points, yes, why not? I mean, you're allowed to have those mistakes. You're pushing.
Lewis
I
didn't
get
have one
it.
of those mistakes. He was pushing.
Maybe he wasn't pushing hard enough. Like he
No, but he
wasn't
was
pushing
though.
the
We
way.
know he was because I told you as I say, every single
Again,
time there was a bit of a
pushing
threat. He
from
upped his pace.
pushing from pole is different than trying to chase someone down. And you would agree with me. The way you approach attacking versus defending, or just kind of building, maintaining a lead, is a very different thing. You know that. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, but I would say that if you've got a charging Max Verstappen coming at you, you're probably not sitting there comfortable in your position.
no one is. I mean, and that's
Correct.
my point. That's my
Correct.
point. This is the whole thing. The fact that Max was charging.
So
Yeah,
that's why I say that Lewis probably wasn't sitting there just going, I'm in the lead. I can just let him come at me.
I
I'm going to
didn't say
push a
I'm
bit
taking.
harder.
I didn't say I'm
So he
taking
did push
anything
hard.
from Lewis. I'm saying I'm adding more to Max's bucket. I'm not taking anything away from Lewis.
Yeah, I just think that's a weird thing to add. Max made a massive mistake, so we're going to
I mean, that
celebrate him.
is one of the iconic moments, like him catching
Yeah,
the car. That's quite a
yeah,
bit,
yeah.
and that
And I
wasn't the
do.
first time in his career either. So
No, no, it wasn't. But I do wonder. Yeah, the other one was in the dry. But I do wonder
Hungary, right? Yeah,
I do wonder if uh, if the mystique around this drive has a lot to do with that save, which I just find a bit ironic. It was a great save. Like honestly, the way he did it was unbelievable. But he did do it. He did get in that position in the first place.
sure.
But I actually don't think that's going to change my opinion, which is that
Shocking.
I, that for the longest time I thought, well, yeah, Max's drive was great, but somebody else won the race. And I think actually looking back on it now, yeah, my opinion has probably changed, like even with that, even with all the caveats in there, it doesn't take away from the fact that Max had to, in the spray, find the lines, go past a bunch of people, including one of the
Crazy.
championship contenders in a Mercedes. Yeah, it's marginal. It's marginal, but I got to give it to Max, I guess.
Wow. So both get 11th. Look at that. Who would have known?
Yeah, there you go. On that bombshell, I think it's time to call it a day. But as usual, please like, please subscribe, please leave us a comment. We read all of them. We respond to as many as we possibly can. We've got a whole bunch of Lewis and Max content to come. We've even got some Lando stuff coming. We will see you guys in the next one.
Later.